Welcome to the front row. I'm your host, Brad Rowe, and this is a space where unfiltered stories of the human condition get told. Pull up a chair. My childhood wasn't that bad. That's a story I always told myself. I saw kids around me that had it so much worse. Parents that weren't involved at all. Parents that were drug addicts and alcoholics. Much poorer than I was. The only food they had was school supplied food. Yet I still couldn't figure out why I'd carried so much pain and so much pressure. Then a few years ago, I was working with a therapist and I took a child development test. And I scored in the 90th percentile of people that should have been in jail or dead based off the things they've experienced in life. And that's when my world just blew up. So let's go back to the beginning. I grew up in Seaburg, New Hampshire, a small dried up fishing community on the seacoast. It was laden with blue collar workers, alcoholism, drugs, generational trauma, you name it. Mom and dad had me really young. Mom was 21, dad was 22. And then about 18 months into my life, dad finally admitted that he was gay and walked away. So I think it's a great place to start there, talking about the abandonment. You know, as a little boy, our fathers are one of the things that we want most in life. And dad just wasn't around that much. His life was all about horses. He was chasing this dream, and it seemed like horses were much more important than I was. I can't tell you how many times that dad said he would come and pick me up for a weekend and bail last minute because of something came up. And I would sit there and just bawl my eyes out. And then I would take it out on my mom like it was her fault. And she did the best she could to console me, but she was just a single mom trying to survive herself, and it was just me and her against the world. So my dad, you know, horses were his life. So when I was with him, I was on a horse farm every single day. Whatever weekends, whatever time I was with him. And with that, you know, I felt like slave labor at times, especially as I started to get older. And as you guys know, when you grow up on farm, there's always something to do. There's always horses, stalls to muck, and you know, aisles that need to be swept, and loads of shavings that need to get unloaded, and bales of hay that need to get stacked, horses that need to be groomed. And that's really where the pressure to perform started too. Because my dad just wasn't a casual horseman. He was a trainer for high-performing saddlebreds. And so I started riding competitively at a very young age. And it just so happened that the style of riding that I was into was called saddle seat equitation. That's literally how perfect can I look on that horse? And how perfect can I make that horse perform? So I think that's really where perfectionism and the performance pressure really kicked in. You know, through time, as I started getting interested in other things like sports, football became one of my biggest passions. It drew distance between me and my dad because he took no interest in that stuff. And so, you know, there was more of that abandonment and more like he didn't care. And, you know, there's so many other things that I've been through with my dad. He was a dream chaser, but my dad's ego got in the way all the time. And every good opportunity he had, he would blow it up. And so money was tight. I can remember times we'd go to the store to get food, and, you know, dad would have a pocket full of change just trying to get a can of beans and some hot dogs and not have enough to buy enough food for both of us. So he would go without eating or eating very little when I was there. Coming home to eviction notices on his doors and having to spend the night in horse stalls when I was with my dad. I mean, there I was at the Saddlebred World Championships in Kentucky, riding a couple $100,000 horse that my dad had negotiated and bartered with me to be able to be on its back. in a $3,000 riding suit that, again, dad had a good friend who made my suits for me for next to nothing. But yet here we were sleeping in this old 1970s six horse hauler that we drove from Massachusetts to Kentucky. And I'm around all these rich people. I think I'd rode William Shatner's horse that day, and a couple of my dad's clients were, multimillionaires. And our living conditions were worse than the illegal grooms that were working there. And I remember this one time. So, like I said, my dad was gay, and he had this one boyfriend. And it was winter. I was with my dad for the weekend. It was probably like a -degree day. My dad wakes me up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go to the barn. And I think I was maybe like 9 or 10 years old. And I just wanted to sleep in. I didn't want to go freeze my ass off all day and be slave labor. And then I heard my dad's boyfriend tell him that I was lazy and I was never going to amount to anything in life. And, man, I didn't realize at the time, but those words cut me so deep, so deep. And to this day, I think that's the reason why, or one of the main reasons why I was just such a workaholic. I refused to ever let anybody call me lazy again. And so it was my mission to outwork everybody, everywhere. My dad and I's relationship got really strained. Not only was he not there for me, and it wasn't supportive in anything else in my life unless it revolved around horses, but even when I was there riding horses, he was an asshole. He was my trainer and yelling and screaming at me. And like I said, nothing was ever enough. I was never good enough on the horse, in the ring. So I was about 13, and I just decided one day to stop riding, to walk away from horses, because it was the only way I knew I could hurt my father. And it was something that I took away from my life that I loved, because I loved the horses. I just hated everything else that involved around him with it. And I was good. But I stepped away from that in my life because I wanted to hurt him. And I don't even know if in the moment I knew that that's what I was trying to do, but obviously subconsciously it was. And so I haven't stepped on a horse's back except for the week of my wedding in Costa Rica when we all did like a horseback riding tour as a whole huge family. Like I said, football is my life. And I played from the 3rd grade all the way through college to the prep year, everything. And I think my dad's made it to 2 games in my life. So that caused so much hatred towards him, that here's this man that I wanted more than anything in my life. And I felt like he wanted nothing to do with me. And it came to a point where I just hated him. I mean, that carried on for long in my life. I stopped going to visit him when I had the choice to, had that autonomy to either drive down and see him or not. I didn't even want to invite him to my wedding. If it wasn't for my grandmother, he wouldn't have been there. But my grandmother wouldn't have gone to the wedding unless I invited him. I remember this one time there's a couple times me and my dad almost came to blows. One time in particular, I was, when I was in Los Angeles, I had a meal prep company, and me and my ex-wife we were engaged at the time, but we were both going to compete at the USA's, and I needed someone to step in and run this food prep company. So I told my dad, and I was like, hey, I'll fly you out here if you can run things. Because my dad, this is what I'll give my dad credit for. My dad was a hustler. My dad was a dreamer. My dad was so talented at so many things. I used to call him jack of all trades and king of nothing. An amazing florist, but he got severe contact dermatitis that he couldn't really pursue that, and he just couldn't work for anybody. He was a great cook. He ran this food truck that we would bring to horse shows. He'd be training and showing and working the food truck. So I know he had skill at that. And so I flew my dad out and I paid him a pretty nice wage for the week to be there while we were away at the show. And when I came back, some of the orders got messed up. And I was just, I didn't place well. I was pissed off as it was. And then as soon as I come back, I had to do damage control and remake all these meals and run around like a chicken with my head cut off. And he starts getting pissed at me because I wasn't taking time with him. And I just lost it. And we went off and just battled. I was like, you are not here as my father. You are here as an employee. Like, you have never been anything in my life. And I'm giving you an opportunity to make more money here than you would have made, back there, and an opportunity to at least help your son out. And everything gets screwed up and I'm trying to fix it. And you're bitching that I'm not spending time with you when you never spent any time with me. And we had a couple moments like that. And so that's what this little boy who just never had a father in his life, never had that male role model in his life. That was part of my brokenness, part of my journey. And then on top of that, my dad was gay. You know what it's like growing up, especially in the Northeast, having a gay dad? As soon as kids found out, I was tormented so much. Everybody's telling me I'm going to be gay. And then you start questioning those things, and you're looking at boys, looking at girls at a young age, being like, do I like her? Do I like him? And it's this disillusion, this distortion that you just shouldn't have to navigate at that age. And so maybe it was always chip on my shoulder that I felt like I had to overcome with that too. And then there was mom. Mom had a rough life. My grandmother died when my mother was young. And her father gave her up, basically, took her brother and gave her to her aunt and uncle, where she wasn't exactly treated the best there. Then mom had me at a young age. And then my dad left and came out. And you can imagine what she's going through. Her husband leaves her and becomes gay. Those questions and things that she was struggling with. Mom was a workaholic and probably one of the most selfless people that I know. But she was unemotional. I shouldn't say that. She knew anger. But it was just a little boy and his mom through everything. And our relationship was great, or so I thought. Mom was so supportive. She was there for everything, never missed a thing. Worked her ass off. She would wear hand-me-downs and go to the Salvation Army and get clothes, to make sure that I looked decent and had stuff to wear. Always putting me above her. Always putting other people in her life above her as well. But our relationship had its challenges because, like I said, anger just ruled because of that survival mode. And so we had this relationship where everything was a knife fight. Everything. We would look at each other wrong and just snap and just blow up, and we could yell and scream. I mean, she's hit me with frying pans and punched me with huge rings on her hands and you name it. But 2 seconds later, we could just brush it off and sit down on the couch together and watch TV. And I thought that's what relationships were like. So I remember the first time I started dating someone, And I snap on them because I have a short temper, and they don't talk to me for a week, and I'm like, "What's going on here?" Like, I'm over this. I've been over this right away. I didn't realize that's not how normal people operate. Again, mom was there for me for everything, but mom also pushed me a lot too because she wanted a better life for me. She wanted me desperately to do better than people in the town I was in. Like I said, we had an extremely low high school graduation rate. Drugs ran rampant to my town. Mom was a bit of a clean OCD freak. My whole family was. Um, so any of you guys that watch my day in the life videos of waking up at 2:30 in the morning and cleaning my house, like you, my mom, my father, my grandmother. I mean, you could eat off my father's floors in the horse barns. That's how clean they were. And so mom would never let me leave the house if my hair wasn't looking right or if I had a wrinkle on a shirt or a stain anywhere. And again, that perpetuated the perfectionism that I'd carried and the self-image that I'd carried. And also things just never seemed like they were good enough for her. I mean, yeah, she would say good job, but she would never just grab me and hold me and tell me how much she loved me and how proud she was of me. Um, so mom pushed me, for good reason. And I felt like no matter what I did was never enough for her. It was never to a good enough standard. So this feeling like love comes from performance, love comes from perfection, that you have to earn love. It was really ingrained at a young age in my life. And then as I began to pursue a different path in my life, and I'll dive into this into a future episode, but mom just didn't understand this path I was going down. I wanted to be a doctor and actually went to school to become an orthopedic surgeon. That was the path I was going to go down. And when I took that twist and went to go into bodybuilding, she didn't get it. She didn't understand. And when I left her, she felt like I abandoned her. So as I pursued this bodybuilding career, no matter how much success I had, I was filming national commercials and all over GNCs, magazine covers, but it wasn't a traditional route for my mom. And like I said, she was just one of those people that she had a factory job and she felt like she owed her life to that company just for employing her. And so by me taking kind of an untraditional path, I don't know, maybe it reminded me of her father, my father, but it just didn't seem like real life to her. And I know she's proud of me. Unconditionally, I knew she was proud of me, but my mom was just not a very emotional person. Um, I kind of joke and I tell people that I was raised by probably one of the most toxic masculine women you can imagine because everything my mother went through. But that little boy in me, I just wanted that nurture. I just wanted to be held. And, and told I was enough no matter what. And, she just couldn't give that to me because I don't think she'd give it to herself. But that, man, that was so hard on me. And I didn't realize it. And it made me very emotionally unavailable as well to everybody else around me. And there'll be more as I touch base on that story and that relationship in a couple more episodes, but that was the mom chapter. And then there was the other family. And my mom's side of the family was great. It was amazing. I was so blessed in the fact that I grew up in one of those small towns that everybody was there, no one left. So as a kid, I had my grandmother's house, I had my aunt and uncle's house, another aunt, and then a close cousin lived across the street, and it was just this little compound there. So, mom worked a factory job, so I was dropped off at school, either at my grandparents' house or at, kind of the compound down there. So I was always around family, and especially my mom's side of the family. I love them. I love being around them. I had an older cousin who's like my big brother. And, it was like the big brother thing where he could push me and want me to be better, but we didn't have to go home and fight at night. But he pushed me hard because he was proud of me, but he wanted so much of me. So again, the person that I looked up to the most, he was 7 years older than me. There was this drive, like I was never enough for him. I remember being in high school and I'd rush for like 187 yards, 3 touchdowns, have an interception, 2 sacks, block a punt. And I'd hear, "Hey, what about that block you missed in the third quarter?" And it was like, okay. I remember this one time I just started baseball. I was in 3rd grade and I flinched at a ball coming at me, and he took me to my grandmother's house because he was the one that lived next to my gram in that compound, and put me up against the barn and just sat there with a bucket of balls and just whipping them at me, just pegging me nonstop, trying to teach me not to flinch, toughen me up. When he was in high school, I mean, I was a good athlete and strong even as a young kid. I remember him taking me to his high school lifts, and I'd be training with these like seniors in high school, and I'm 7 years younger than these kids, and I'm leg pressing more than them and squatting more than them, and so I know he was so proud of me. He just wanted more of me, but he definitely pushed me to be better. But there was a lot of trauma around that as well. That side of the family we were very close knit. And so my aunt and uncle, his parents, they were the closest thing to like a real family nucleus that I had. And every Sunday we'd be over their house for Sunday dinner, and there'd be, 12 to 15 of us. So that side of the family was half Italian, and we'd get together, and it was my favorite day of the week. It's my favorite day of the week. I loved my aunt and uncle. I loved being around my cousins and just food. And I remember I was like 9 years old, and I used to eat a ton. I was a garbage disposal. And I remember this one day I was just stuffing my face, and this thought came in my head of like, let me go throw this up so I can eat more. And that's when a lifelong battle of bulimia started. At 9, I would just binge till I couldn't move, go puke and go eat more. because there was so much joy. I hated going home. I didn't want to go home alone. I wanted family because I didn't have brothers and sisters. I didn't have a dad around. So I just loved that feeling, and it just imprinted on me. And to this day, I still battle bulimia and binge eating. It's probably one of the greatest battles uh, that I still have to overcome in this day. Being around family there, again, I talked about just generational trauma being passed on. And so I've had witnessed domestic violence, my grandma and grandpa yelling and fighting with each other and throwing things at each other and getting physical. Lots of verbal abuse everywhere. On my dad's side, physical and verbal abuse there. But I thought it was normal because that's how everybody was. I didn't think anything of it. And that's how I was conditioned. Thankfully, I never got physical with anybody in my life that I loved. But I thought that was normal. And then, there was a time where I blocked most of this out. So I can't even trying to figure out ages and when it all happened, but I was probably 6, 7. And I was sexually molested. And it just wasn't one time. It was something that went on and on. And, the people that it happened with were a little older, so I looked up to them and I thought it was okay. But deep down inside, there was a shame that I knew something wasn't right. And at 6 or 7, shouldn't be asking yourself if you're gay, if you like boys, because you're all touching each other and playing with each other. And it was the devil's distortion, and I didn't realize it. And I lost my innocence, and I had no respect for my body sexually, which led me down a path of I slept with everything that walked through my teen years. I actually lost my virginity by basically getting raped as well. I was in 8th grade, and this girl I knew, she had been dealing with her own mental health battles, and we were over her house at a party, and she had been drinking. We all had a couple of drinks, and she brings me down to her room and starts fooling around me, and she goes to put a condom on, and I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And after me multiple times stopping her, she ends up biting a chunk of skin out of my stomach. And so I just laid there and let her do her thing. And yeah, so even at a young age, I lost the true meaning of sex and using your body. To me, kissing was intimate. When I was sleeping around with all these girls, I wouldn't kiss them because that was intimate to me. Having sex didn't mean anything. And, I cheated on pretty much every girlfriend I was ever with. And thankfully, I had the wherewithal never to cheat on my wife. For some reason, when I met her, it just clicked of that's your best friend, don't hurt her. But I would spend summers with friends. My buddy was a lifeguard at the beach, and going back to my other cousin that pushed me, I think he tried to live vicariously through my life. And so when I went out on a weekend, if I didn't hook up with anybody, he'd always have this line. He'd say, "You're about as useless as a $100 bill in a whorehouse." No, I'd say, sorry, he'd say you couldn't get laid with a fistful of hundreds in a whorehouse if I went out on a weekend and didn't sleep with someone different. Um, and again, to me, I had no respect for my body at that point. So yeah, as you sit back and kind of look through that childhood and I know this is going to kill my mother, and I've been struggling to even record this, to think about it, because I know my story isn't just my story. It is my story, but I know it's going to bring pain to a lot of other people's lives. But I know so many other out there people that have been through these things, and I know that it can make an impact. So I have to tell this story, but I blocked most of my childhood out because I was so miserable. I was fighting so many demons. My mom hates it when she'll talk about some core memory and I don't remember a thing because I blacked it all out. High school, I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. I mean, I'd get drunk on a weekend and have fun, but I was just so serious all the time. I always worked. I was a workaholic. I started mowing lawns at like 11, riding my bike 15 miles to go mow a lawn just to make $20. All through high school, played sports, straight A student, 2, sometimes 3 jobs at a time. Never took vacations, never did anything. Just, my mom never vacationed. A vacation for her was she'd take a Friday off and spend an extra day at the beach. She was a beach bum. We lived, in a beach community. So, no one in my family did anything for themselves. So all you knew was work. So I'd carried this mentality where I felt like if you weren't miserable, you weren't doing it right. And the more miserable you were in life, it meant you were on the better path. And I carried that for so long in my life. And there's so much more. I don't even know where else to go with this, but I think that's enough for today. We'll pick things up on another episode. So I hope this story helps. I hope my story helps. I hope my story hits. And, I'm so grateful that going back to that Costa Rica trip that I talked about, I went through some major healing on that trip. And it allowed me to talk about some of the things that I've been through. And just by expressing that to people in my small circle, I've had a lot of people come out and admit that they've been through things like that and they've never told anybody. And so this is even more conviction that this podcast needs to be out there, needs to be shared to make an impact in other people's lives and to allow people to come on and tell their stories and get things off their chest. This story ends today, but yours is still waiting to be told. You're not alone in this walk in life. If this hits you, share it with someone that needs it. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Find me at Brad B. Rowe at Instagram. And if you're ready to step into the front row of your life, whether it be the fellowship, the foundry, coaching, or support the ministry, you can find it all at frontrow.co. I'll see you next week.